In Mansfeld, he spent his childhood and then he was sent to further schools. And of course, the church St. Andrew, the oldest church of Eisleben, the church where Martin Luther preached for the last time, and Luther's death place. So follow me now, please. Martin Luther was born here in this suburb of Eisleben, St. Peter and Paul, and was baptized the day after his birth in the church St. Peter and Paul. And it was a small church, as I mentioned already. The second patron saint, Paul, came in the course of the time. There used to be another town not very far from Eisleben, and it was called Little Eisleben, and it was destroyed during the wars. So the people came to Eisleben, settled down here, and they brought, of course, the church with the patron Saint Paul. And since then, this church was called St. Peter and Paul. And so it was a church that used to be in the suburb of the miners. So all the miners came to this region, settled down here as Martin Luther's parents too. And of course, all the children were baptized also here. Martin Luther was baptized here on the 11th of November 1483. It was the day of Martin of Tours, and that's why he was called Martin too. 3 years after Martin Luther was baptized, the people started to make the church much larger. And 1518, the church was ready. And a new baptism font came also to the church. And the font in which Martin Luther was baptized, it was forgotten. It stood in the garden of the priest, was used as a plant basket during the time, and it was not much left from this font. The teachers of Eisleben found it 200 years ago, but only pieces of stones. So they renovated this font, and here it is. This is a new one, a baptism font, but the original stones from Martin Luther's font are still inside this one. In this area of Eisleben, there is a river, Böse Sieben, or when the snow was melting, all this area was covered with water. So this church was also stood under water, and it was necessary to renovate the church. And 2012, the church was opened again here, and since then you can choose between two possibilities of baptism. In this one, or right here with the whole body by emerging. So it is possible. You can also see in this floor the circles. Some are light, the others are dark. That means that the light circles stand for the times when we are close to God, and the darker one mean the times when we are far away from God. And if you take a look at the windows, you also can recognize the symbol of water, of waves. So At the time of the Reformation, or before the Reformation, the church got 9 altars. But with the beginning of the Reformation, only this one remained, with the Saint Anne. You can recognize Saint Anne on her clothes, on her head. So she was a grandmother of Jesus Christ, and she is also the patron saint of the miners, especially in this region. So this altar was produced not very far from Leipzig and is 500 years old. So, yes.
What about the stained glass? Is that way old?
About?
Stained glass.
So they are really new here in the church. The church used to look different in former times. So these windows came to the church at the end of the 19th century, and they are very typical for the churches in the middle part of the Germany. We are celebrating Thanksgiving. Yes. So the church is really full because we have got 2 kindergartens or nursery school, or Lutheran one. So all the grandparents and parents of the children come to the church to celebrate it. So Martin Luther's birthplace is the oldest museum in German-speaking area, and one of the oldest museums in the world. Martin Luther's family lived here only 1 year long, and then the family left Eisleben and started to live in Mansfeld because of the work. It was not possible for Hans Luther to find work as a miner here in Eisleben. And in this house used to live other peoples who rented this house. And in the year 1693, the city of Eisleben established a museum here. And also the museum used to be in the first floor, and right here there used to be a school for poor children. In the course of the time, the school was just too small for many children, so the Prussian king Friedrich Wilhelm III donated a new building, and this is this building just on the opposite side of Martin Luther's birthplace. So this was a typically house, a flat at Luther's times here. Hans and Margarete Luther came to Eisleben in order to work as a miner. So the father, of course, not the mother. Hans Luther was the oldest son of his family in Möra. He came from Möra, near Eisenach, and according to the tradition of those times, he could not be an inheritant. Only the youngest son got everything that his father possessed. So Martin Luther's father got some money as a start, and he came to Eisleben because the uncle of his wife, Margarete Lindemann, so the uncle was Antonius Lindemann, and he was a chief executive of the mining industry in the county of Mansfeld. And on his recommendation, the family came to Eisleben. A problem between Martin Luther and the Jewish people at the end of his life, as everybody knows. So the front sides of the houses, of some of them looked very pretty, but if you look from the back side, so it is different. It is different. Both parts of the street. It disappeared. So here at this place, it used to be a door or a bell gate, or it used to be a gate with a bell. It should warn the people when the water came out of the river, or even it was something else threatening the people. But also the people who just wanted to go into the city at night, they should ring the bell. The men came out, and the man who wanted to enter the city should pay a coin, and then she was allowed to enter the city. So that's why bell gate. And nowadays too, there is a market day 2 times a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So everybody can buy vegetables or fruits or some clothes here. Yes, we also have got a Christmas market. It is 3 weeks long, but there is also now a tradition for a Christmas market in the backyards of Martin Luther. So every backyard is opened. People of Eisleben didn't want to stay here anymore, so the Count said you shouldn't pay taxes for the next 5 years, and the citizens stayed here and built their beautiful houses around the market place. And so all these houses goes back to the 16th century with all these houses here on the left side. They used to be houses of the smelting works managers. But in the course of the time, when Luther died, the Counts of Mansfeld bought these houses and established their castles inside and this place around the marketplace. So it is also a big exhibition, but not as big as in Wittenberg. So such stones you can see everywhere in Eisleben, and such stones were used for the oldest wall around the city of Eisleben. So maybe some of them originate from this wall. So they are made of sandstone. Andrew, it's the oldest church of the town of Eisleben. It was firstly mentioned in the 10th century, but in further times the church was made out of wood. At the beginning of the 13th century, people started to build the church as a Romanic church. But at the end of the 15th century, it was damaged in this big fire that damaged lots of parts of Eisleben. So the people renovated this Romanic church. But before the Reformation, the church used to have 14 altars. But they were removed with the exception of this one. This altar was created maybe in the south of Germany, but nobody knew who created this altar. But it goes back to the year 1480, so it's really, really old. And the wings are open at every time. In the St. Peter and Paul Church, during the Eastern time, the wings are closed. But here you cannot do it because the wings are in a very bad condition because of the wood, because it is so old. Yes, yes, Ernst II. It is. This is Thanksgiving, also in this region, in this area, and there are some women who create about how to heal different diseases. And he was also famous for being a patron of Jewish people here in Eisleben.